This speaker series is sponsored by the East Bay Photo Collective. So we're a nonprofit photography, arts, and education organization here in Oakland. And we offer creative community programs, and wow, people are really coming in. I guess the BART train must have just showed up. So we offer a variety of programs around creative community, and then we also have a brand spanking new gallery here in downtown Oakland, in Oakland Chinatown. Some of the volunteers are here. Kathy Walton, one of our prime volunteers, is here. Hey, Kathy. And so if you are interested in learning more about the organization, maybe Anita would put something in the chat, put our link in the chat, and then also places where you could volunteer. We would love to have you involved. And we have multiple events every month, and they're all just about, inspiring you to be creative and to learn and share. And this is just one of those events. So this is part of our Photography Out Loud series, speaker series, and that's been going on monthly all year. And again, they all end up on YouTube, but it's just really delightful to see everybody here today. But please check out our website, epco.org, and it has events coming up, including our big party, end of the year meaning in October. So big photographer party in October here in Oakland. So I hope you can come, and it's just always a great event every year. So I'm Vince Donovan, co-executive director of East Bay Photo Collective. Also here is Anita Gay. She is the other co-executive director. And but I'm going to hand the floor over to Saul Bromberger, who is organizer of this speaker series. And so I'd like to thank you so much for organizing this series this year. It's been such a tremendous success. We've had real exciting speakers and lots of real stimulating conversation. As Gabrielle speaks today, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll pause every 10 or 15 minutes to go through questions in the chat and get some conversation going. And at the end, of course, we'll have some extra time for conversation. But as we go, please pop your questions in the chat, and then we'll pause, go through the questions, open up the mics, have some conversation, give Gabrielle a break from the presentation, and give her a chance to talk to us. But I will hand it over to the illustrious Saul Bromberger. Take it away, Saul.
Thank you, Vince. So I thank you so much, everyone, for coming to tonight's presentation. As Vince is talking, it just occurred to me how much I've enjoyed these presentations. We all have our work, and I'm a working photographer and with a lot of jobs. And doing these presentations, I realized really centers me into what I started doing 40 years ago. And one of the reasons, in looking at Gabrielle's work earlier tonight on her Instagram page, I remember what I loved when I was working at a newspaper, connecting with people, telling stories, getting into people's lives, sharing what I saw with other people. She has amazing work, and I remembered how I first got to know you, Gabrielle. Sandy and I, my wife Sandy and I, had some photos up at the Harvey Milk Center, and you had some photos of another exhibit on a wall, and yours just stood out. And I was thinking, who is she? And I got to pay attention and keep an eye on her. And pretty soon I connected with her on Facebook, and then she got a job at the Chronicle. And it's just been a pleasure and an honor to follow your work. It's really incredible. When I started inviting people for this presentation, you were like right up there at the top of my list. I really wanted people to get to know you and your work. So I'm really glad you're here. So Gabrielle, I just want to let everyone know what you've done. You're a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for your story about Jessica and her mom, Lurie, a mom who lives in Seattle who came down to San Francisco to see if she could find her daughter who was living on the streets. Your first story that you did last year, I think it was, or maybe 2020, of a young boy, Theo, I can't say my THs, 7-year-old boy living with his mom on the streets of Berkeley. I mean, that just blew me away. The way you got into that family's life and spent a year with them. The commitment. I was thinking, my God, what a commitment she has. So I just, as I was just looking at your work on your website and Instagram, it just occurred to me that you're a really great storyteller. And that's what I hope everyone gets out of your presentation tonight. You're really good at telling stories, getting into people's lives, gaining their trust. So anyway, over to you.
Wow,
I'm looking forward
thank
to hearing.
you. I hope I can live up to that. That's very kind of you. And thank you for having me. I appreciate everyone who's coming and listening. And please feel free to ask the questions in the chat. It helps me not feel like I'm just talking at the computer. But tonight I'm going to talk a lot. I'm going to tell you about kind of how I got into photojournalism and photography and how I kind of made my way into telling stories, and then kind of my approach. So it's a little bit long, but I'm gonna share my screen. All right.
Yeah, we can see it just fine, perfectly.
Perfect. So for those of you that don't know, I'm at the San Francisco Chronicle. I'm a staff photographer, 6 years now. This is probably when I was 5 or 6 years old. I'm not sure what my mom was thinking dressing me like this, but here we are. I grew up kind of surrounded by art. My mom was an interior designer and now is a painter. So, aesthetics was kind of always interesting to me, always pointed out to me. But it took me a long time to kind of find my path and figure out what I wanted to do. I didn't have the kind of traditional trajectory of becoming a photojournalist. Like, I didn't go to school for photojournalism. I didn't have internships. I never had an internship ever. So, I just did a lot of learning as I went. So I think I'm going to talk about that too, because I think there's a lot of different ways to get into this. So I ended up in New York City for college. My first year I was pre-med, but I was spending all my time on the streets of New York, photographing. It was such a good excuse to go anywhere, right? Like, oh, I'm going to go, you tell your friends, oh, I'm going to go take pictures for a few hours. And then you can ride the subway to the end of the train. You can go anywhere. And it's just such a good excuse. So that's what I did. And I would meet people and I would hear their stories. And I don't even think I knew at the time that that's what photojournalism is, right? It's connecting with people. It's hearing people's stories. And eventually I was just photographing so much that I ended up switching to the photo program, which was more arts-based and conceptual photography, rather than, they didn't have a photojournalism program. So I didn't even really know what that was, but I knew that I was inspired by photographers like Bruce Davidson and Mary Ellen Mark, portraiture by Richard Avedon. So all of these people who kind of had a documentary slant. And this is Sally Mann's work, documenting her family. So, a lot of my learning was really going out there and taking pictures, right? They say that it's 10,000 hours or something. It's probably more like 100,000. But in my junior year of college, I went to India, and that was the first time where I was consistently taking photographs and kind of finding my vision. And I felt like, okay, this is what I want to do, but I didn't understand where or how I could do it. So I thought, okay, maybe I can, be in galleries. But I still don't really know what a documentary photographer, how they can make money. But this was a good learning experience for me to just see and learn and have time to make pictures. I think that's very, very important if it's still a hobby for you, is to make time to make pictures, because that's really the only way that you'll learn. So this is all really early work. And still me connecting with people, right? Even people that I don't necessarily speak their language, just connecting, talking, learning. When I graduated college, it was a recession, I would say worse than where we are now. I first got a job at a bus tour company in Harlem, and pretty quickly jumped to a job at a photo lab in Chelsea, and it no longer exists, unfortunately. But it was a black and white photo lab, and they were processing film and printing photos for like the best photographers that you could think of. Robert Capa, and like anyone that was good would go there. And so I would get to see contact sheets. Some of them were artists. There was Dwayne Michaels, and I would look at their contact sheets. I would look at everything, and it was, looking back, it was such a good experience to see their process, and also to see like, hey, I can do this. It gave me this confidence, like, I think I can do this. I'm going to try to make the leap. It took a long time because, I had to, pay rent and everything. But what I started to do, once I figured out that I wanted to do photojournalism, which really took a long time, I think I was 26 or 27, I just really went for it. And I started working backwards. So I would give myself assignments. I would go check an event that's coming up. I would go out and shoot it. And then I would edit it as if I was a photographer. And so that is what kind of gave me a portfolio initially. And I started working for a small local paper in New York. I think it's super important to make personal work just to get freelance work, because in the beginning, it's really a catch-22 of like, well, I know I can do it, but I don't have the photos to back it up. But how do I get the photos if I don't have the work? So you really have to go out on your own, assign yourself different things. And it's also a great way to meet other journalists. So I assigned myself this story about a man named Carmelo, who was blind, and I wanted to spend time with him and kind of figure out what his life was like. So this was sort of the first time that I got to spend time with someone, over and over again. This was probably 2012 or 2013. And so I learned about his world. I learned about his family. I learned how to gain trust. And it's not like these are the most amazing photographs, but it's not even about that. It's just about learning to get in, get close, right? Like I went to his physical therapy, riding the subway with him, going to get his nails done. He was diabetic. I learned how to kind of be a part of his journey. I followed him when he ended up getting sick. A few years later, he passed away, but we always kept in touch. And this is a really important story for me because it gave me kind of it was the thing that made me say like, okay, I think I can do this. And I want to do this. I want to tell someone's story. So when I moved out to California, I gave myself some time to try to be a freelance photographer. I emailed every single editor of every paper here, and I either didn't get a response or I got a response that said, please do not go into journalism for your own sanity. And I just sort of used that. I used that as fuel for my fire. And I got one response from the San Francisco Examiner that said, actually, we had our intern had a family emergency, so check back with me in a couple weeks, and we may need you. At that point, I had a website with some work that was okay, but I emailed back in a couple weeks, and they turned out they needed someone 3 days a week. So that was a huge learning experience for me because I was going out every day. I was learning the ethics of journalism. I was learning how to caption. I didn't know any of these things. I went in very blind. And then I just started freelancing more and more, learning more and more. Eventually, I would meet other journalists that would say, oh, hey, you should contact this editor. They're looking for someone. And slowly started working for AFP, Reuters, The Guardian, learning just how to shoot fires, portraits. And then the Chronicle became a really big staple for me, probably in 2015. I was working for them nonstop. And, I think for those of you that are trying to get and do freelance work or get a job, it's important to know there are moments in your careers where you have to kind of take something and run with it. So I knew that this encampment that was being cleared out in San Francisco was kind of spoke to the national news. And so I had wanted to contact the New York Times. And this was the moment I said, okay, I have the front page of the Chronicle. Maybe they want this kind of coverage too. So I would encourage you, if you're still new, like don't reach out immediately when you want work, but maybe when you have something that's important to them that will help them respond, because they will need you. So they happen to say, oh yeah, we need you. Can you go photograph the same thing that you photographed for the Chronicle yesterday? Right. So then I was working for about 1.5 to 2 years as a freelancer. I was considering going to graduate school. And then I said, you know what, I'm learning so much just on the job. And, it was kind of my dream to be at the Chronicle. I was working so regularly, like 4, 5, 6 days a week for them. And I just became very reliable, and also very tired.
Gabrielle, maybe
take a break?
Yeah, can we
Yeah,
take a
sure.
break for a second? And there's a couple questions in the chat, especially referring to your early experience where you talked about assigning yourself a story. And can you tell us a little bit about how you communicate with folks to get them interested in your assignment and gaining their trust?
Now or then in my
Then,
early
back
work?
then, when you're just getting started on your own story that you created.
Yeah, well, I would fib a little bit, and what I would say is that I'm a student and I'm learning.
Nice, yeah,
And I mean,
classic.
not to someone like Carmelo, he knew, we knew each other very well. Um, but yeah, in general, I would just go out and be like, oh, I'm still learning, I'm a student. And people actually really, um, are really excited with that. They're like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, we'll help you. Um, so it's not really as threatening, and you are a student, like you
Right.
are learning. So you don't necessarily need to be in school to, be learning. So this was my kind of my way of learning, is just giving myself homework. So that's kind of what I would say usually.
Many photographers that I know, even photographers that shoot people, are actually kind of introverted and shy. And what how do you build that bridge to people, whether they're strangers or people that you know? I mean, just seeing your pictures of a Carmelo, I mean, that already the trust that you had really comes out in those photographs. Are you kind of a naturally outgoing person?
Yeah, I think it depends on the situation. I can be really outgoing. I can also be nervous and shy. But I really felt like my camera always gave me the purpose,
Mm,
and that it's never about me. So I think that helped to make me feel like I'm not at the center of attention.
mm,
It's always about this person. Um, in terms of meeting people, like it's hard. It's really hard. I think you have to get used to a lot of rejection. I think, and it hurts, it stings even now, like even now when I go on an assignment where I have to talk to strangers, like it takes me a little bit to kind of get in the zone and be like, okay, you can do this. um and but you just kind of go for it, and then when you do connect with someone, it's so worth it, because you're like, oh wow, like I did connect with this person and they have this great story. um a lot of people just want to talk, they want to share what's going on. You'd be so shocked that sometimes you're like, okay, I got it.
mm.
Um, but yeah, I think in terms of trust, it's really just about going over and over again and just showing that you really care, and also explaining what you're doing and why you're doing it. All of the people that I've photographed know what is at the other end of this. And they know why. And sometimes they need to be reminded, or sometimes they need a break.
Mhm.
And I can talk about that more. But yeah, I think you have to just kind of trial and error for your own comfort, and just be comfortable kind of with some people saying like, why are you talking to me? Go away.
Right. Great. Okay. Bethany has a question about later on when you're working at the Chronicle. So maybe we'll save that once we get into
Okay.
more discussion about your work at the Chronicle. Okay, off we go.
Okay, you want me to keep going?
Yeah, please, if you're ready.
Yeah. So when I was hired at the Chronicle, I was still very green. Still had a lot to learn. I still do have a lot to learn. And my goal was just to be able to make a good daily photo. Like that was really all I wanted to do. Is okay, they're giving me a story. Can I, get at the essence of the story? So, I photographed all different things, from sports fans to, family game nights, another young blind boy, fires, the apocalypse. um, and I just, this was sort of where I feel like I cut my teeth and really just learned how to kind of be there for all different kinds of moments. And I think these are really important times for a photographer, going out and really just learning just how to tell a simple story in an hour or even in 10 minutes, because, sometimes that's all the time we have. So these kind of daily assignments prepared me for kind of being able to anticipate emotion, being able to anticipate people's reactions to things like in larger stories, and just learning to connect and learning when maybe you don't connect so much, because you're not going to connect with everyone. And it's okay. You have to kind of learn the cues of like, they're sick of you. Maybe you should leave. And so this was the first couple years of being on staff. And then I started working on smaller projects. I became friendly with reporters and slowly gaining some trust that, okay, maybe she can take on something that's more than just one day. Maybe it's 2 or 3 days, right? So one of my first small assignments was about graduating in Paradise, the Camp Fire, which burned through Paradise, California. Burned this young boy Lance's home, and he was graduating from high school, and he didn't have a home to go back to. So he was graduating, but he was also kind of leaving forever. His family was moving, and his father was actually the principal of the school. So it was sort of about his last moments as a high schooler. And this is his dad on the left. And so we just followed them for a couple days. What is his life like? And this is kind of where you learn to ask the questions of like, well, when are you having dinner with your family, right? Or are you going to do anything before the graduation? And then you hear little things like, oh yeah, I think I'm going to cut my hair. Oh, okay. Like, let me go to that. Let me be there for that. Because even if these things sort of seem banal, like this is part of what connects you to other people, is the simple little things in life. And this is one of the first stories where I had to kind of keep going back to this young kid who, kind of could take it or leave it if I was there. So learning how to kind of tread lightly, but also tell their story. And it's a hard story to tell because it's a fire that happened, several months prior. I did another story related to fire soon after that about a man who was a firefighter whose tractor fell while he was trying to clear brush, and he got in an accident, and then the fire also burned and killed him. And so it was sort of about how does his family, move on after this loss. Loss is something we often write about in the paper, but it's very non-visual. So you have to think of how do I show this person who passed and the effect that it's having. So, I spent a couple days with this family, and, I hiked down to where his tractor fell, where it still is. And then I wanted to show, kind of some symbolism to his son and his son's interest in tractors. These moments of putting your child to bed, little details, and, looking for places kind of emotion. Like you want to take people on a kind of a ride through ups and downs. So like here, obviously they're not upset explicitly about their father, but, just having a moment and having some emotion and some love. So again, this is where I really kind of just learned how to spend time with people. And I realized that if I wanted to do this more, which I really enjoyed doing, then I would have to come up with a lot of projects myself, because the paper is busy and we have a lot of daily needs. So what do? You do research, you read, you listen, you look, you learn. And what I mean by that is you read national news, you read hyper local news, and you listen to people around you, what's going on, themes of things that are happening, what's happening in your area that is maybe related to national news. You are also a journalist. You're not just a photographer creating art for an article. You can go out there and kind of lead the way. And so I also think collaboration is super important. So talking to reporters, seeing what's on their mind, even just talking to friends, seeing what's coming up for people. I think you can get lots of ideas and things can spin off of each other. So that is one reason why I still like doing dailies, is because I can go out and meet people and talk to people and see where maybe things go, right? I'll talk about that a little bit more. So in this case, I was photographing an RV site, and I heard this little boy on a scooter behind me as I was photographing people. And I thought, there's no way that he lives here. And I sort of just put it behind me. And I really didn't like the photos that I took that day. I can't remember why. It may have been just the light, or there was no one around. And so I came back the next day and the same thing happened. This boy is scootering right behind me. And so I asked the person who I was photographing, I said, does he live here? Is he homeless? What's going on? And so they said, yeah, oh, he lives in a tent in between these two RVs. And I was just absolutely astounded that in Berkeley, there's this little boy, 7-year-old boy. And I went and introduced myself. And, that's kind of where it all began. They wanted to share their story. They were very open to me photographing them. And so I spent 4 months, and then I gave them a 4-month break. We actually thought we were going to publish the story after the first 4 months. But then the pandemic hit, and we felt like we needed to see how that was affecting them. So we had 4 months on, 4 months off, and then another 4 months. So, and through this time, it's a lot to be photographed all the time, but it's also comforting too, I think, to have someone who cares about you consistently. I was probably the most consistent person in their life. If I said I was going to be somewhere, I was there. And so I also laid out some ground rules, like right away, like there are things I can do and there are things I can't do. And what I can do is tell your story. What I can't do is pay for a hotel for you. And that was hard sometimes, really hard, really, really hard, especially when it was cold and rainy. But, you develop, friendship is not exactly the right word, but somewhat of a friendship. You get to know each other, you get to spend time, and in time they trust you that you can do what you say you'll do, which is tell their story. I really wanted to show Theo not just as someone who is homeless, but also as a child, and also a child who's very loved. Because although he struggles, he also gets to fly a kite and watch TV, and his mom signs him up for swimming lessons. And so the nuances of being homeless, you know, kind of challenge the stereotypes that we know. I think the other reason I was so drawn to this is because we've photographed homelessness for a really long time in the Bay Area, but not necessarily through the lens of a child. And, you know, I think it also speaks to a larger national issue of children who are experiencing homelessness or, you know, poverty and kind of struggle. Sorry, there's a lot of photos here. There's some outtakes in here.
Can I break in here, Gabrielle?
Sure.
Because Eric's been asking, and I think it's something interesting that when you photograph something this intense, and it's emotional to witness people's lives being so challenging and difficult. How do you deal with it? What do you do? How do you deal with it when you get off work? Do you talk to someone? Do you share your work with friends, family?
Everyone. I think that they probably want me to shut up. I talk about it a lot. Yeah, I mean, you know, these relationships become as important as like your family in some way. You know, I lived a lot of my life with them for that period of time. You know, he went to school from 9 to 6, so I couldn't really be with him, and that was a really big challenge to try and be in school with him. So I would go at like 6:30 in the morning, get their morning routine, and then I would be there like at 6 at night. And so I think when you see it day to day, it's not as painful as it is overall. But I did talk about it a lot, with family, with friends.
Can you
It's
also talk about your time commitment? You just said 6:30 in the morning, and then you come back at 6 at night. So
yeah, and on the weekends,
and
because
on
it was challenging because he's in school. This was the only time I was allowed in school, and it was for his birthday, and it was just such a challenge to try and get into school. But yeah, so it was hard because I had to work around like a huge chunk of time, you know, which is my work day. I was just so committed. I believed so much in this story. I still do. It didn't really feel like work. I think for me, when I'm super excited about something, like I'm dying to be there. When I wasn't there, I felt like I was missing things. So yeah, it's a huge time commitment. You know, you really are kind of like walking in the footsteps of, you know, in their life. I knew their routines so well. If they weren't awake at 6:30, I would just sit outside their tent until they started rustling. And sometimes it was like 2 hours and Theo was late to school, you know, and I would just sit there and wait, but I felt like it was worth it. I still feel like it's worth it. So, you know, you can't get moments like this or a lot of moments if you're not there. I should also mention, like, you start to know the community. So for a while they were living in this park that was near like a taco place. And so I got all the numbers of the taco owners and I would call them and I would be like, where are they? Are they home? Can you look for me? You know, I had phone numbers of some of their friends who were also homeless and I'd call them and say, have you seen them? Because that was another challenge in this is finding them. Even though she had a cell phone, it was always broken or in her backpack. And so you kind of start to know where people are, you know, where they hang out, where they eat. And I would just show up. I would spend hours looking for them. I think something that I go through now is like 95% of the work you don't see. You don't see me sitting outside the tent and her saying, I don't want you here today. You don't see me driving around for 6 hours unable to find them. Um, you know, there's so much work that goes into these stories that you never see, but it is worth it in the end. This photo, even though it's not my favorite photo, it took me a really long time to show him upset because he didn't get upset very often, visibly upset. He would be introverted, but not visibly upset. So I really wanted to show kind of all of his highs and lows. And then this is, exasperated during the pandemic.
Gabrielle, what's your relationship with Theo like now and their family?
So it was hard. Well, Naomi, which is Theo's mom, always kept a pretty good relationship with me. She had a little bit of a hard time with our writer who, talked somewhat about her mental health. But I think we always feel kind of a closeness to each other. I saw them not too long ago, like maybe a month ago, and he's so much bigger now. It's crazy how fast kids grow. So I think we have a pretty good relationship. But it's one thing that I learned in this process is that it's a lot for someone in their life to be, exposed like this for anyone. That's just unexpected. I think once something publishes that, like, everyone sees it, everyone knows who they are, kids are saying things at school. And so it's taught me sort of to tell people in advance, like, hey, this day that it comes out is going to be a little challenging for you, or might catch you by surprise. But I think, she was really happy with the photographs. I print photos for her. I think Theo doesn't care either way. He just loved spending time with me and with our writer, Sarah, which is another thing. Like, there was times when I just put down my camera and just played with him, or talked to him, or watched TV with him, or, watched him nap. Because not every moment is necessarily visual, right? And also, like, you just want to spend time with people as a human. I think for these longer stories, you have to give a bit of yourself, like more than you would probably on a daily, right? Like, if she dropped her groceries, I would help her pick them up. Maybe I wouldn't do that on a daily assignment.
Right.
But in this case, like, there are certain lines that I felt like I would cross. Like, during that time, my parents were in a really nasty divorce, and I talked about it, because that was my struggle, and she related to that, and she was sweet about it. She wanted to know about it. She would ask me about it. And, I wouldn't tell someone that on a daily assignment. I wouldn't tell most people that. But I felt that I needed to let her a little bit into who I was. Like, you can't just be a blank slate.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you're not a journalist and that you have to maintain that integrity, but I think you also have to kind of share a little bit about yourself, and and that you're a layered, nuanced person who has their own kind of struggle.
That you're kind of addressing a question that Najee has here about putting your own feelings and perspective into the images, and what is the balance of your own feelings?
Well, I think that it's kind of always going to be through your feelings in a way. I can't show every single moment of his life. you know, in thousands of images. So, you know, I think what we do is kind of compress time and show what is most representative. I don't think that I injected, you know, my feelings really on it. In fact, during edits, you know, we would talk about how can we show her caring for him? How can we show, you know, that he gets to do things that are fun? How do we show his emotions? So, you know, I think I wasn't like picking and choosing so much. I was more trying to compress the time I spent with them and show sort of, whoops, sorry, show the ups and downs. Hold on.
Is there
I don't know if that answers the question. I mean, I think, of course, I was super sympathetic to their situation, and so I tried to show it as sensitively as possible.
is there ever a time when you put the camera down and said, I'm not taking the picture?
I don't really put the camera down, but there are times when I choose not to. Well, I do put the camera down, actually. She had a I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to diagnose it, but she had an episode that I photographed partly, where she was in a major rage. And I photographed it a little bit, and then I just felt weird and I put down my camera, and I had a lot of kind of going back and forth as to whether or not I wanted to use those images. And ultimately, well, I didn't think it was a nice thing to do, first of all, but I also didn't think it was indicative of her. You know, knowing her for as long as I did, you know, that was the one time that she was super enraged. So it didn't feel fair to kind of give it so much weight. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course, I think you have to be sensitive, and I mean,
you're
plenty
applying an editorial process.
Yeah, and it's not perfect, you know, but
Yeah. Well,
I mean, there's plenty of times when I put down my camera and just give her a hug, you know. Yeah, again, like I really lived a lot of their life. You know, Theo's dad was murdered like a little bit after the story came out, and it was super upsetting for all of us. You know, and we were upset together and trying to figure out what happened together. So yeah, it's not easy, and there's no real right answer. It just I think, has to sit with you well, and you have to be able to look back and feel like you did the story justice.
Can we step back a little bit to kind of your overall experience as a chronicle photographer, and a couple questions around that? You know, whether for a project or for a daily, what is the ratio of number of photographs that you would take versus what ends up as part of the project, or what, you know, what are the keepers that you're going to submit versus how many you actually would take?
I don't know how many photographs I took, to be honest. It really depended, because there were times I would just spend like an hour with them, and there were times when I would spend a whole day or a whole weekend. But I would guess that I spent like 50 days with them, or maybe 60. There's a lot of editing out. There are so many photos that don't make it, and good photos, but not great. So, you know, that was a learning process for me.
Gabrielle,
Yeah.
back to the time commitment. So much of this is on your own personal time, isn't it?
Yes,
When you're
yeah.
not getting paid for this,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And it's not so much like that anymore, but I think, this was sort of my way of proving that I had the ability to tell a story. And it also just was unfortunately the times that they were available.
And when you started at the Chronicle, what was your understanding or expectations of the workload, and how did the actual work meet your expectations?
Um, we all do the same thing. So my expectation was to shoot sports and food and portraits and um, fire and breaking news and some reportage, and that's what I did for a long
Mm,
time. I think they always knew that I was interested in more kind of longer form narrative, character driven work. But there's just not a lot of opportunity and there's not a lot of access. I it's these stories are few and far between. Like getting it takes a very special person to allow you to come back time and time again and trust you. And it took lots of explanation too. Like there were
mhm,
times when she would be like, why do you have to come back? Like, why can't you be done by now? And I would say we need to see you over the passage of time. It can't just be, one day or 4 days. I said I really want people to get a sense of what your life is actually like. And I had to say it several times, and there was at one point when she just said she didn't want to do it anymore. And we had to have a big conversation, like, does she really not want to do it? You know, um, can she really commit to it? And she did. She did. She said, no, I
mhm.
do want to do this. I think she knew that that's the power of her story. I think a lot of people know the power of their story when they're willing to do this. But it does take a unique person.
One of the questions is, how do you know when a project is finished?
Well, it's kind of never finished. I mean, I could shoot Theo forever. I think when you feel like, I started to feel like I was photographing the same thing over and over again. Um, I was photographing him going to bed, waking up, taking a bath. Um, and so, people's lives are kind of cyclical. And I just felt like I really had gotten a lot of what their life was like.
Mhm.
Of course, like the passage of many years and years of his life looks different. And I would love to keep, I photographed him last time I saw him. And I plan to kind of see where his life ends up. Um, so in some ways I'm not done, but yeah, I think you just know, like I've spent a lot of time with you, and I think that your story's ready to be told. Like there's not much else I could have gotten, I don't think.
And then this became a Chronicle series.
This was one big uh article,
Okay.
multimedia kind of.
And how much input do you as photographer have into the editorial contents?
Not much.
Um,
Well, I work closely with my editor, Nicole, and we go through edits and we talk about we really are in sync and I love her edits. So I usually don't have too much of an issue, but we go back through and sometimes I'll say, hey, I really like this one for this reason, and she'll think on it, and then things get cut because of sequence or things are repetitive. But in terms of the way it looks and lives online, I don't really have any say over that. Um, and probably would do it differently. I think that's one thing is like once you've done the work and you kind of pass it along, it's sort of like a football, like you don't know where it's going to go, and you
mhm.
sort of have to have faith that the people that you work with are talented and good at what they do. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not as good. I hope that answers the question.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there's a couple more questions about this project.
Okay.
So I'm going to throw these questions at you
Sure.
all at once.
I'll try to be quick and
Okay.
but I can.
So here they are in a row. One, did you ever feel vulnerable or unsafe? Two, did you offer financial compensation, or either you or indirectly through the agencies you work with? And then were there release notices required? And what do you think they got out of the project?
Okay. So I don't think I ever really felt unsafe. Maybe there was one time they were in an encampment late at night. Not a great idea to have a camera around, but I felt safe because I was with them. And I felt like they kind of vouched for me. So they're like, she's cool. So no, I feel much more unsafe in San Francisco. And did I ever give them money? No, I think maybe I bought her a coffee once or twice. But I didn't think that that was problematic. I think it's problematic if someone's doing the story because they're being paid or bribed. But I felt like it was just a nice gesture. And, she offered to pay for me several times, like to buy pizza, it just so I wanted to I think I wanted to make her feel like, I don't know how to put this, but I think a lot of people who are homeless feel that there's a separation between people that are homeless and people that are not homeless. And there's shame oftentimes in that. And so I just kind of wanted to treat her like I would treat anyone, like, oh, let me buy you a coffee. So yeah, no, other than that, no, there were times I wanted to give them money for a hotel, but no, I didn't, because I just kept feeling like the story needed to be told more than that one night of sleep, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
In terms of how they felt about the story, well, so there was a GoFundMe that got them $75,000, a lot of attention. They're now in Berkeley student housing, which I guess has a few affordable housing units. There's some complications with it, but I think it got them on the right path. It's hard for me to know if they liked it. I think probably, like I said earlier, it's a lot to put your story out there. So I think at times they probably felt vulnerable, especially in the beginning when they're being recognized. Mostly like, oh, I saw you, like, I didn't know that was you, or I had no idea that you were homeless, I can't really say. I think it was probably up and down, but I think the fact that I still have a relationship with them means that, it was at least okay.
Right. Are there releases when you're doing photojournalism?
Oh,
like this?
releases. I did get releases. I
Mm-hmm.
do not get, I've never gotten releases for anything else. But when she was kind of wavering, I wanted to be very clear, like, this is what you're signing up for. So I had her sign waivers twice, actually. Unnecessarily, but I just wanted to be clear, like, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. And I didn't want somehow for the story to come out and her to say, no, I didn't give permission.
Right.
And he's a minor. So I wanted people to know that, she said it was okay.
Of course. Well, great. Well, there's, people are saying really wonderful things about the Theo project, and thank you so
Well, I
much
better
for,
go fast because I have
yeah,
like
right.
6 other projects here.
Yeah, let's see him. Let's see him.
So after this story, which was like very emotional for me, and like I said, I spent a ton of time with them. I really needed a break, and it was also the pandemic, so it was really hard to get close to people. So I really wanted to push myself and to do something new, which I would encourage everyone to do. You know, podcast, do video, or you know, something different. So I decided I wanted to take portraits with 4x5 film of essential workers, people that maybe were not just nurses and doctors, but people that, you know, had to keep working. So from, you know, farmers to this guy was a sheet metal worker, and he was making HVAC systems for hospitals, you know, round the clock. My mailman, you know, there were just a ton of people that I think were kind of overlooked. And I loved this project. It was totally different than what I normally do. Got to meet people, interview them, you know, hear about what they do, what was scary for them. And it was just a lot lighter than what I had done.
There's some large format fans in the audience here. They're tickling their fancies.
Yeah. And this is also, you know, I learned on film this is what I did in school. So
we could see your inner Avedon coming through here.
exactly. Yeah. So I had fun with it. You know, and it slows you down a lot. And the pandemic kind of slowed us all down. So, so I also photographed, well, let me give the backstory, which is that I was photographing a teenager, and she said, she's just, I don't even know how it came up. She started talking about her uncle who works at a funeral home. And I was like, and how busy he was because of COVID. And I was like, huh, can I talk to your uncle? And then this is how this started. So this girl, her uncle runs a funeral home, and he started telling me that everyone in his community, which was Bayview Hunters Point, was dying, and that he was seeing bodies of people that he went to high school with. And so with a reporter, we did some research, and we saw that the majority of people were coming from the Bayview and the Mission. And so we spent time in the funeral home. We spent time in the Bayview, just sort of to document what was happening. And this wasn't like such a long-term thing. It was just a couple of days, but you know, very topical, and just an example of how, like, just kind of listening to people, and just sort of saying, hey, can I call this person up? You know, could be really helpful. So this story, The Fight to Become a Firefighter, is about a guy named Joshua who was an incarcerated firefighter, and he wanted to become a firefighter when he came out of prison. And there was a new law that was going to help inmates get their records expunged. So I want to say something about this project, which is that initially it was 4 guys, and we were going to follow them and see like where they went. So one was in LA, one was, you know, they were all over. And, you know, I was just so curious to see what was going to happen to them. And the pandemic hit, and everything was shut down. Like, I had full access, like great access to their camp, to everything. I could go to everything, and it in an instant shut down. So I never got to their camp. I could only really photograph them outside. So everything changed, and we had to kind of pivot and say, like, okay, it's not about these 4 guys now. It's about this one guy, and we're going to have a chunk of his life of this journey missing. Like, I don't have him in prison. And that was really hard for me. I was super frustrated. but I just kept with it. I got him getting out and coming home, and kind of his journey of like, how is he gonna become a firefighter? And ultimately it was very complicated and too difficult. And he's doing like forest work up in Canada now. So that was kind of a smaller story. This next story, this came, by the way, that other story, the firefighter story, came from me and from a collaboration with my friend and writer, Lizzie Johnson. We had been following this, the law that was being put into place. And we thought, like, how can we tell this story? Also, how can we tell a story that is related to wildfire, but is more personal? So anyway, this story came from my editor. We followed a Berkeley doctor as she went to Oklahoma City, which she did every month to perform abortions. Super challenging, because getting people's permission during such a tough time is hard. And I had 2 days, and then I went back, so I had 4 days in total. And the way that I did it, well, the first time I was kind of getting to know everyone, and then the second time I wrote up a little note that said who I was and what I was doing, and I had the front desk hand it to everyone who walked in, and so people who wanted to talk to me would. Trying to show the outside, what's happening outside, what's happening inside. The clinic has since been shut down, and she now goes to Kansas to their other clinic. But we were actually some of the first to report on women coming from Texas to Oklahoma for these procedures. Oops. I think the most gratifying part of this story for me was many of the women thanked me. They were so grateful that I was there, and almost to the point that I said, like, there needs to be a social worker here, because I think having someone to talk to through this experience is a lot better than being alone. So, those kind of things kind of move me forward and remind me why this is important work, but also, like, on a personal level, I made this experience better for this person. I made them feel heard. So this is a story about Brianna, 10-year-old girl who her family was evicted during the pandemic. I had heard that there were evictions happening in the Central Valley area. I read articles, I contacted nonprofits. I heard this is happening a lot. And I got my reporter Lizzie, who I work with, roped in, and we just went to Fresno, where we heard that evictions were happening. We set up a sheriff's ride along to try and meet people who were being evicted. We drove around just talking to people. Ultimately, the sheriffs said, "Oh, yesterday we evicted this family, and this girl was so smart. You guys should go and try to talk to her." So we missed the actual eviction, but we got sort of the aftermath. And I met them when they were just sitting on their porch. They had nowhere to go. So they were sitting on the porch of where they had been evicted. The mom was very sick. Grandma up top was taking care of them. She climbed back through the window to look in her room and grab stuffed animals. So I spent time with them, and it was clear that there was a lot of tension, that the home was what kept the family together. So this is her mom and brother, and her mom wanted to move back to Alabama with the rest of her family, and her dad didn't. And so it became really obvious that something was going to happen with that. And she was also very, very sick. So, you know, there were all these kind of things in play, and we just sort of kept photographing, kept in touch with them. What's happening now? What's happening now? So this is when I knew they had to get all their stuff out. So you learn when to ask for what pivotal moments that are going to be happening, right? Like, I wanted to show the motel that they're staying at, you know, how this is affecting her. Here she's staying with her grandmother, avoiding a little mouse on the floor. She was very close with her grandmother, so, you know, showing that kind of connection. This was their house that they were evicted from. She had some serious issues, so she was leaving the motel to go to the hospital. And, you know, her family from Alabama decided to drive out to California and pick them up. And we knew that this was going to be really challenging because Brian did not want to go. And he also did not think that his wife was in good enough shape to go. So the family showed up, and there was just a real argument. And ultimately, Brianna had to decide what she wanted to do. She was kind of being pushed in two directions, and the cops showed up. They ended up arresting her father for something else. And her mom left everyone behind, and she ended up dying on the road, actually, which was really, really sad. And you know, in some ways I regretted not being there, even though the story was more about Brianna. There was a part of me that said maybe I should go on this trip, but you just can't know what's going to happen. So she's still living with her grandmother. This story raised like $20,000 or $30,000, and they also have someone who's helping her with school, so paying for a private school and private tutor and computers and stuff. So, you know, it's nice that helped her a little bit, I think, and also just to show that this is happening, because it's really easy to hear that evictions are happening, but to see it and to see how it can break apart a family. You know, he loved his wife and his wife loved him, but it just broke them. So, if we want to see this last story, I don't know if we do, but I have it pulled up. The Lurie and Jessica story that we were talking about in the beginning. Do we want to see that or no?
Can we take a quick couple of questions?
Sure.
We haven't talked too much about technique, but Angela would like to know, what equipment do you carry with you? Do you use a tripod? Have you got other photographers working with you?
I work by myself, except, let's see. I shot a video that went along with this story, and I had someone second assist on the video, or second shoot on the video twice. But other than that, no, I'm shooting by myself. Generally, I have two cameras. Recently upgraded to one R5, but usually just the 5Ds. And then, you know, a 24 to 70, 70 to 200, sometimes a 35 or a 100, sort of depends. this story, I only had one body and one lens, which was unfortunate for the storytelling. But it was the only way I could shoot it because I had my camera hidden under me all the time because it was just not safe to have my camera out. I mean, it was not safe at all. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions?
Let's see. Yes. Hold on, I gotta find it.
I have a question about the Fresno story.
Sure.
Did you and the reporter stay at a local motel like for, it sounds like a week, 4 or 5 days? How long, what kind of a leash, quote unquote, did the Chronicle give you to go to Fresno and how much and spend all that time down there?
Yeah. So after the Theo story, I think I got a little bit more leeway in being like, hey, I have this story, and they kind of would trust me a little bit more. I think if I'm correct, that the Theo story like broke every record, right, that we had at the Chronicle. So I think it sort of proved the importance of narrative stories and the people's response. So I had a little more leeway. We were driving back and forth a lot. We did stay at hotels. Sometimes I would go on my own. But I would say that this was over the course of like 2 months. And we just sort of, we would hear that, oh, the family's coming from Alabama, and we would just, okay, we better drive down. So I would say we only stayed at a hotel maybe 2 or 3 nights or something like that.
So when that happens, when you get the news that you got to go down to Fresno because the family's coming back, does the staff at the Chronicle then pivot to cover for you for your daily work, for your daily assignments, so that you can go to Fresno?
Yes and no. I mean, I give a lot of credit to my other staffers who pick up the slack. I think, every day we have too many assignments for the amount of people that we have. So we're always freelancing assignments.
Okay.
So it's maybe like adding another freelancer. Also a lot of these things are happening at odd hours. So not necessarily my hours, right? Like over the weekend or again at night or, so it's, if I spent maybe 6, 7 days and 8 days in total, it doesn't make a huge difference, I don't think. But I mean, my colleagues are great. And, I think we all pick up the slack for each other when someone's working on something.
This leads nicely into a question from Kelly Sullivan, who she says she's met you on assignment, and she's definitely looking at the bigger outlets like the Chronicle and SF Gate. And what's the process of finding freelancers?
Usually they're reaching out to our photo editor, our assignment editor, and showing work or pitching work. Unless, one of them, someone is recommended highly. But I think, you kind of have to be your own advocate as a freelancer and sort of be ready in the sense that you're aware of the Bay Area, aware of important things that are happening, aware of how to send images on time and caption and all that jazz. But I think just sending emails and follow-up emails, and it takes a lot of persistence. I can tell a very shortened version of this story, but when I wanted to become a freelancer, I emailed the then director of photography, Judy Walgren.
Judy Walgren.
She answered my first email. I think she must have just been right at the computer, and then nothing. Follow up. So, like the creepy person I am, I saw that she was going to a gallery opening, and like on Facebook that she had said, yes, I'm going to this opening. So I showed up at the opening. I had a little card with one of my photos, and I had written out like, I'd really love to sit down and meet you and chat with you. And she was talking to people, and I just said, excuse me, you don't know me, but if you could read this later, maybe we could connect. And she opened it in front of everyone and started reading it. And I was mortified, and I didn't really know anyone. Still in San Francisco, I was pretty new. And she was like, wow, you are so persistent. Let's set a date right now.
Awesome.
And we looked at work, and she was like, yeah, you're okay. Not that great. Because I just didn't have that much.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't hear from them for like 6 months. And then I heard from them for a protest one day, and it just never stopped. Because if you just keep doing well and become reliable, like they're going to need you. So.
Do you remember what the opening was? Where you tracked her down?
Yeah, it was at the Rayco Center.
Yeah.
Which no longer exists.
Yeah.
Rayco Photo. I don't remember exactly what the opening was, but it must have been in like 2015, I think.
Yeah, she was good friends with Anne, the
yes, and
curators. So yeah, she was. Yeah, I used to see Judy there all the time.
Yeah. So be persistent, because it pays off. This, people are super busy, so just try not to take it personally when they don't get back to you. Honestly, my editors don't get back to me. So, regarding things that we're working on. So if that just tells you that, they're swamped. So just keep, if you think that you're cut out for this, just go for it. So I'm going to run through this quickly. This is
please.
The story of Lurie Steves trying to save her daughter Jessica from using fentanyl. And I flew up to Seattle to get Lurie packing her apartment to move to San Francisco. Ultimately, we didn't use those images just because it didn't really make sense. But I drove 12 hours back with her, and that was a lot of bonding time. So we got to know each other really well. This was a very tricky story because I knew what she was trying to do before Jessica knew. And so I wanted to meet Jessica before I met Lurie, but it was a little bit complicated. Anyway, her mom had put up missing signs like 3 or 4 months earlier. So she sort of knew that her mom was looking for her. And she often goes to a deli in Soma. And so the owner of the deli was willing to tell me when she showed up. And that was the only way I could track her down because, well, aside from driving around for hours, which I did. But yeah, she doesn't have a cell phone and she's not reachable. So that, it just made it really challenging. And, the story is really about this mom trying to reconnect with her daughter. This is the first time they saw each other in 9 years. They went to Denny's. It took her like 3 or 4 times to find her in the Tenderloin. And it took a lot of time to get Jessica to trust me. She didn't like being photographed. So I would find her after 7 hours and she would tell me to go away. So that was hard, like even here in these photos, she was like, stop. She really didn't like the clicking noise more than anything. So I actually changed to a Sony so that it was silent. And that was very helpful. I think the clicking noise was irritating to her. But I tried to show these moments, but it was hard because she moved to the Bayview. She had a full-time job. She was really strapped for cash, like really strapped, like she didn't even have enough gas money to drive down to the Tenderloin. but every time she did, I would go with her and see if, she could find her and try to document their relationship, and the struggle. This photo was actually made after the story published, and after her mom ultimately left. But I still follow Jessica, and we witnessed an overdose. She actually saw it. We were chatting and she saw the guy fall over. So I thought that was kind of interesting, just given the fact that she's overdosed like 60 or 70 times. The impetus for Lurie going to find her daughter is that her son died the year before of an overdose, and she didn't want to lose 2 children. So I wanted to kind of show how challenging it was, that her mom was really alone, that they were kind of disconnected, and she wasn't really making any headway. And eventually she got fed up. She felt like, if she doesn't want to get help, why am I here? And so she packed up and went back to the Seattle area. So, it's really the story of like wanting to help someone you love, but being unable to. And the challenges of that, because there's so many mothers who are in Lurie's position. So I think it speaks a lot to like family dynamics, but also to drugs and, the difficulties. I don't know if you guys can see this. The difficulty that we have nationally, right? Like, especially in the pandemic, fentanyl got really bad. So I actually am on way better terms with Jessica now than I was ever during this project, which lasted about 3 months, I think. 3-4 months. I think Jessica was very nervous about how she would be portrayed, and just didn't trust the story. And she loved it. She absolutely loved it. She loved the photos. She loved the story. She thought we got it all right. And she wants me to hang out with her all the time. So I have more trust now and way more access now than I did before. But it is really tricky because the tenderloin is so dangerous. So that's why a lot of these, I would just pull out my camera really quick and put it back. So that was kind of a frustrating new challenge for me. So that's all I got, pretty much.
Oh, awesome.
If anyone has any questions, you can feel free to email me, or ask now. But, I think I would just encourage anyone who wants to do something like this to just know that it takes a lot of time and a lot of putting down your camera and just making that connection and showing someone that you genuinely care.
Where do you see yourself in 5, 7, 10 years?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. I think I would like to do more of this work. Maybe other work that's more national, either with the Chronicle or somewhere else. But I would love to cover immigration. That's something that's pretty important to me. My mom's an immigrant, so I haven't been able to cover that a lot. And I would like to cover climate change, which actually California is a good place for that. But I think I would love to do, not all the time, but to have a few more kind of stories outside of the Bay Area, because there's only so many angles. I mean, there's great stories here, I mean, I have a real nut I'm trying to crack right now that I've been after. I've been trying to tell the story of the drug dealers in the Tenderloin. So I mean, anything that's kind of challenging and just a different take on what we've seen and done, and a more personal take, I guess.
Bonnie, Gabrielle, did I read that you had started an organization of photographers?
Oh yeah. So, well, there's already Women Photograph, which is like a international, I guess it's a nonprofit for women. It started, this woman, Daniela Zaltzman, had heard over and over again from editors like, oh, I don't hire women because I don't know any women photographers. So she made a massive list and said, well, here you go. And so I sort of started the San Francisco chapter, and we took a hit during the pandemic, but we've had speakers, we've had portfolio reviews, we've just had nights where we gather. So yeah, it's really cool to meet people in the community. I moved to San Francisco and I did not know a soul, and it was really, really hard for me. So I didn't want anyone to kind of have that challenge and have the barrier. There's a big barrier in photojournalism. Like, someone asked the question, like, how do you get in front of an editor? And this is a way. So I wanted to kind of give access to people.
And so is that Women Photograph? That's the larger organization, and you're the Bay Area.
Yeah, they were trying to do chapters all over the world, but I think we're the only one that actually stuck in the end.
Okay, just gonna put the Women Photograph link in the chat. I noticed you have a tintype on your bio.
That's from Reiko Photo, actually.
Nice.
Yeah. There's also there's a great guy in Santa Rosa who does tintypes too. I would love to do tintypes myself, but it takes a lot of work.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, and it's really
Thank
been.
you for listening.
Yeah.
Can I ask what you use to catalog and process your work? Do you use Lightroom, or do you use does the Chronicle use? What software and equipment do you use for cataloging and editing?
Yeah, so usually what I'll do with a shoot is I'll upload everything to Photomechanic first. And I label everything with a date and with a title. So they're all in folders by date. And then once I've made a selection through Photomechanic, I export everything to Lightroom. And that's kind of where I do some toning. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Lightroom is more intuitive for me, I guess you could say. There's only 2 of us on staff that use Lightroom. I think everyone else uses Photoshop, but Lightroom is just my choice, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for the question. Great. Well, any parting words from anybody? Any final questions that want to clear up?
That was an awesome presentation. Yeah, your work is beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I would love any feedback too, because I'm not a great public speaker. So I'm sure I rambled.
I'd like to add something. That you started off by saying how people like Bruce Davidson influenced you.
Yeah.
As he did many other photographers. I know myself, he influenced me a lot. His East 110th Street project is amazing. And what I want to say is how it ties all the way back to what you're doing now. The way you connect with people, the way he connected with people. I mean, East 110th project, what I know is he set up his camera in the middle of the street so people could see him. And that's how he gained trust with people. And this is what I tell everyone who I wanted to see this presentation of you. She's got this amazing talent of gaining trust with people. And so what I want to say is this project he did in the late 60s, I think early 70s, and it connects all the way back 50 years later to what you're doing now.
Well, he's definitely an inspiration. I should say that actually while I was working at the Photo Lab, I interned for him.
Oh, wow.
I actually worked for him. He paid me, and I helped him edit his retrospective book, which was pretty incredible to hear stories. So I think another thing is to kind of meet people who do this work, talk to them about their experiences. You know, that's the best way to learn, is just through what other people have gone through.
Gabrielle, I hope you can come to an event at our gallery at Oakland Photo Workshop sometime soon, maybe an opening or one of our other events. But don't be surprised if people are handing you cards, you know, with their information on it.
I don't have that much power though, you know, but I'll help you get to the bosses.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. It's really wonderful to have you all participating.
Can I ask what gallery you're talking about or what event? I'm from Wisconsin, so I don't know.
East Bay Photo Collective, we have a gallery here in Oakland called Oakland Photo Workshop. And again, if you go to the East Bay Photo Collective website, it has all of the events.
Put it in the chat.
Thank you, Anita. Has all of our events, the current show, and there's the next show is opening first weekend in October. So that's going to be a terrific show. And then we have regular events there. So yeah, please take a look. All our events are open to everyone. So everyone means everyone here. We'd love to see you.
Awesome.
So East Bay Photo Collective and Oakland Photo what?
Oakland
Workshop.
Photo Workshop.
There's a
Workshop.
link if you look in the chat. And this is East 100th Street. So
Oh, there it is
anyone
in the
wants
flesh.
to,
It's a classic.
anyone who wants to come over and look at it.
Wow.
right.
That photo, the portrait you had of the little girl holding a flower, whose dad, the firefighter, passed away,
Yeah.
reminded me of that little girl in the terrace and the cover of that book.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're right. The way that I never thought about that. It also, yeah, and it sort of mimics some of Sally Mann's work too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, I would also encourage people to look at, you know, some of the documentary photographers who worked for like Life magazine. And, you know, if I had been alive then, that's probably what I would have wanted to do. So thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much,
Thank you.
everyone. Have a
Have a
wonderful
good night.
evening.
Bye.
Thank you.